2/3 of the world's poorest population was in something related to agriculture. That means they live with less than $2 a day. Even though we're producing enough food to feed the world population, 1.2 billion people live in hunger or undernourishment situation worldwide, while 1.3 billion tons of food are wasted every year. 2/3 of it before even arriving to the markets. It is predicted that by 2050, we will need to produce 70% more food, but with the expected planet temperature increase, it will make it much harder for farmers to reach those numbers. So I started asking myself, how might we use technology to improve smallholder farmers' life? I started to look for different state-of-the-art technologies, and I saw that not too many of these technologies or resources were accessible to the Latin American farmers, sometimes because of the language, sometimes because of the context, and other times because of the technical complexity, at least for a primary education level. But I also found a lot of interesting open source technologies and DIY tools created by other farmers or engineers, but these ones would also need some basic fabrication skills to build them. I speculated some ideas to address different farming issues like a DIY climate simulator, but I figured out I was jumping into solutionism by trying to solve something I didn't really understand: agriculture. I started volunteering in an urban orchard in Barcelona called Connector. I also took an introductory permaculture design course. Tried to grow my own spinach at home, and even created my own humidity sensors and recycled pots. But the deeper I went into agriculture, the more I realized that I still had a lot to learn. Then, in March 2020, COVID-19 took over the world, closing borders, limiting imports and exports, and restricting labor. Farmers did not have restaurants, hotels, or school to sell their products, and less than 50% of the regular workers collected their crops, making food security a major concern. But with this COVID situation, new weak signals began to appear. People trying to learn different farming skills, people trying to grow their own food at home, farmers and consumers connecting directly through WhatsApp groups, Instagram accounts, or apps, people who rent land spaces to grow food as a service for others, and even a family of Colombian farmers who became YouTubers.
Hola!
Hoy le vamos a enseñar cómo reutilizar la cebolla.
For my third intervention, I was going to help the itinerarian foundation in Rupi to build a farm book, and then I would teach the townspeople how they could apply these or other technologies on their farms to start introducing them to agricultural technologies, but this intervention was postponed by the COVID-19. So I tried to replicate it on a smaller scale, teaching some of my MDev classmates Arduino skills through Zoom.
So there's going to be a LED pin, which is going to be 13. In the beginning, the LED state, or this LED, is going to start being off.
By doing so, I realized that sometimes you need easier examples for the people to understand some things. And I started thinking about how to teach these skills to farmers with examples related to something they know or understand quite well, such as food, plants, or agriculture. That made me think, how could we teach making skills mixed with permaculture knowledge to rural and urban people to make them more sustainable, self-sufficient, and climate resilient? Welcome to FarmAcademy. An speculative learning by doing approach with a mix of instructional, guided, and autonomous learning, inspired on the capacity building methodology of the Reflow project, in which people learn first by following exact instructions, then they can adapt those instructions guided by an instructor, and then they create something new in an autonomous way. Everything adapted to their reality, local culture, ancestral knowledge, and their access to tools and resources, a learning that happens in the academy, at home, and also in the field. I know that not all the farmers in the world are going to be interested in learning making skills, but in order to spread this knowledge and interest into the community, the first thing I needed to do was to involve them all in the project, trying to understand their needs and detect some community champions who could help me scale and sustain the project. Then we would do an intensive training with those community champions to teach them the scope of some tools, but closer to their reality, with classes like basic electronics, woodworking, metal cutting, bending and welding, PVC cutting and assembling, working with concrete, molding and casting, and others. Country towns may not have a fab lab nearby, but they do have natural makers like carpenters, blacksmiths, bicycle mechanics, electricians, plumbers, and others. So by mapping and connecting them with our community champions and teaching them the scope of the technology, and then we're gonna make them work together, building some open source projects by following instructions. I believe that in the future, these technologies should be taught in rural schools. That is why I turned the DIY weather simulator into a farming kit. A tool that children can build at school to learn about basic electronics, sensing and digital fabrication while learning about plants, agriculture and climate change. This machine will simulate the weather of different locations around the world so that kids can experiment at school growing plants under different conditions. We could sell them to private schools and donate one of them to rural schools for each one sold. Community champions, local makers and school students could build these or other open source agriculture projects like the Aqua Pioneers or open source Beehive. In the last stage, community champions, local makers and school champions will construct projects to address a community problem, therefore closing the loop to start it again. FarmAcademy should also have research as one of its main pillars, and the commitment to open source all the tools created by the students in order to spread these knowledge and solutions around to anyone who might need them. My next steps are going to be to prototype and build the climate simulator in July, start designing the whole documentation of the farming kits in the next months. In July, I'm also going to build the farm route in Rubit and start intervening the town from there, trying to create, execute and adapt the methodology step by step, scaling it in small interventions. Right now, this is all speculation and it's a lot of work to do, but if we do not speculate and imagine a better future, how are we going to create it?